I'm working on the review and assessment of the activity on Jules Verne that we did last week. I did it for almost half of the class online. I'm also working on the notes on Christine, and everything should be done by Thursday. I'm saying should be done because as the director of the Italian Center, I have the Botticelli week, 3 events. The first one was today, and I have another one tomorrow and Thursday, the third one, plus a digital exhibit on Botticelli and Renaissance art, Dante's The Divine Comedy illustrations. On Sunday, we have rescheduled the Concorso d'Eleganza, organized every year. This would be the 17th edition by the Center for Italian Studies. I have about 50 Italian cars, mostly Alfa Romeo, but the Alfa Romeo Club is a great supporter of mine, so they're overrepresented. I have a few Ferrari, I have a few motorbikes, Italian motorbikes as well. Just to say, go to the announcement where you'll find the new time and the location, but just for now, it takes place on Sunday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. I'll be there before 10 to set it up, of course. In parking lot 2, which is across from the Wang Center in front of Tubman Hall. So if you're on campus especially, pay a visit. But more importantly, don't just look at the car if you can. Talk to the people. The people who brought the car enjoy any kind of conversation or question about their cars. If you're nice enough, they'll let you sit in it, but you'll have to work your way to their heart. To do that, you'll have to look smart enough, okay? And if you want to volunteer and help me, let me know, and there is extra credit available together with my blessing, my forever gratitude, etc. Okay? I think that's it. Just want to remind you that this Friday there is one assignment due, and it's the assignment based on Jules Verne, the one about fast technologies between fear and fascination. Make sure you include specific passages, quotes that are strong, that communicate those themes in a very impressive, convincing fashion, and then your job is to analyze the language and show, where do I see the fascination? Show me the adjectives, the verbs, the phrases that communicate that. Fascination for the technology, fascination for the madman inventor, and of course fear and prejudice against technology as well, okay? Then there will be another 2 weeks. October 20th will be the next written assignment, okay? And between now and Friday, if you have questions about the instructions, let me know or schedule a Zoom appointment. If you need a short extension, just let me know, okay? It's not a problem to grant an extension until Monday, let's say. Okay. Today, now it's week 6 of the semester. We're approaching the midway point. We have a new text, which was a huge success, a real bestseller from that time. Alice Williamson's The Lightning Conductor. Alice was an American woman who moved to England. In England, she started her career as a novelist, and this was really her first big success. More than 1 million copies sold in around 1902. But 1902 was the first edition, and they continued to reprint it for the next 8 or 9 years. They continued to sell books. It was translated, it was even translated in Italian, although the Italian translation which I've found is more like a rewriting or a paraphrasis, a summary of the original. It's not a literal translation as you would expect from a professional translators of today. But the success of this novel spread, and this novel really set the parameters for an entirely new genre, which is called motor romance. Books, novels, short stories, later on films, where the main characters fall in love thanks to an automobile, because of the circumstances surrounding their shared use of the automobile, or because of an accident, or because something else, but the context is always such that the automobile is not just a prop, the way, as I said, especially in the last few films of the Fast and Furious saga or franchise, unfortunately, you find the car used. There is just a prop, something added, right, to make the characters cool. Instead of fancy clothes, or an airplane, or expensive watches, they've added cars. But they're secondary to the story itself for the most part, other than the special effects. They're not the foundation of the narrative. In the motor romance genre, the automobile is like a character. It's a medium that carries on a lot of the story. So we're going to talk about this, and of course, you find here under week 6 4 different presentations. I'm just going to pick passages from one presentation and the other and let you go through the rest. Because you have passages, the last one, of course, is the collection of pages that I've taken from this novel, which is 300 or 400 pages long. I've included just the most significant excerpts. And then the previous presentations that you find listed here, the first 3 presentations, are a smaller collection of individual passages of just a few lines where, through highlighting, formatting, as well as my comments, I've tried to allow you to focus on what is really relevant in terms of the representation of the technology and the significance of the technology, and how, as we've seen in the films, the building of the new identity of the character comes from their usage of the car, and how they learn how to drive, how to operate the car, which includes working on the car, makes them a different person, but not just any individual, but the prototype of a new human race, because of course the world of tomorrow will be a technological world, and either humans of today will adapt in a Darwinian model, become adjusted to coexisting or living in symbiosis with the various technologies, or they will perish. Where perish means not perish physically, but their human profile, their human type, will not be found in the future. They themselves will not enjoy a lot of success. Okay? And keep in mind what I said earlier in one of the previous lectures about the fact, for example, that you find an entire class of people in countries such as the US, but also France, Italy, England, that went from being avid cyclists and sportsmen of the bicycle, with races that attracted a lot of people, especially inside velodromes, which are these wooden tracks with banked curves, turns, so that you don't have to slow down when you turn. They went on, they graduated to becoming chauffeurs and drivers because they had gone through the experience of handling a machine that produces speed and that is physically connected with you, right? When you ride a bicycle, you're one with the bicycle. When you turn the bicycle, you don't move the handlebar like this unless you're almost at a standstill. Otherwise, you just incline your body the way you want to turn, right? So this is, you can call it a culture, but it's material culture, the idea that once your body becomes used to interacting in a symbiotic way with the technology, where human and machine become one, then moving from the bicycle to the car is possible. And finally, the big theme introduced this week, which you will find in many other books, is where's the difference, social and physical, between man and woman when it comes to this kind of new technology. And the evolution, the technological development of society gets intertwined with the proto-feminist movement, which was called initially not feminism, but the New Woman movement, that promoted a different model, a stronger and more independent woman. And once women embrace this technology, and initially you have a lot of female pioneers of the technology, and in here too you find a woman who learns how to drive and becomes proficient in this technology, that produces parity, that eliminates the gender gap, right? With this technology, there is no gender gap anymore. That's one powerful message of this kind of literature. Men and women can be equally good at driving as well as operating the machine, because the machine is not just about driving, it's a machine from 1902. So you have, and you find descriptions, all kinds of levers to operate. You may have between 2 and 4 pedals, you may have a gear shift here, but you have the accelerator often is on the steering wheel. On the steering wheel, you find also another lever to advance the spark, to regulate the ignition, how often the plugs will send the spark to ignite the fuel. But then you have a pump, a manual pump, to pump oil or even gasoline while you're driving. And either you have someone on board the car to do it for you, or you have to do these different things. Okay, so let's start and go through some of these topics. Of course, if need be, I'll continue on Thursday to complete that. Otherwise, if I have enough time on Thursday before the movie, I want to analyze at least one scene from Christine from a visual point of view, and we'll watch more scenes from the movie Christine. So, Alice Williamson was an American woman born in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, married a nice American man, upper middle class. I think he was an officer, but she wanted to be an actress. He didn't agree with that, right? Acting is something you do before you become a married woman, and then it's not proper for a married woman of the bourgeoisie, even the American bourgeoisie, to continue with her acting career. So she left him, she divorced him. Keep in mind that divorce existed, but it was difficult to get one. To be granted a divorce, you really have to convince the judge, which will be one of the topics in a novel we'll do later on, a motor car divorce. Interesting text from 1906, written by another actress, this time from Chicago, who though lived in New York for a long time, in London as well, traveled through Europe and Italy in particular. So she was born in 1858, right? So keep this in mind. She's born before the automobiles. She's born right around the time when the first internal combustion engines are introduced as prototypes in Europe. By the 1890s, she's divorced. She moves to England. And what can a middle, upper class woman do to support herself in London? She writes. And she gets better and better. She gets published in different newspapers and magazines. She starts writing a couple of love stories, and then she has this big success in 1902. But again, what is proper for a married woman, this time of the European bourgeoisie, is writing a proper way to present yourself to society as a married woman? Not entirely. And therefore she, like others, even in France, convinces her husband to add his name to the books they publish together. But she's the sole writer. As far as we know, he might have contributed to a few passages or given some advice, but the writing itself was done entirely by others. And the story of the Lightning Conductor is a metaphor to designate the male protagonist who's a chauffeur, a driver, right? Lightning Conductor because he's the conductor of a vehicle that is like lightning, meaning fast and difficult to master. 1902. So we're talking about a vehicle probably around 30 to 40 miles per hour, right? If you had a race car, then speed could get to 80 miles at this point easily, but not for a regular vehicle. But those were unheard of speeds, and therefore they were considered extraordinary. So in the story, this is the story of Molly. Molly Randolph is the daughter of an American millionaire. The mother is out of the picture, the mother is dead, right? Simplification that you find in all sorts of stories. When you have a story with a strong character who has to mature and become independent and go out in the world, then eliminating one or both parents is a common device, right? From Harry Potter to this thing. So the mother is out of the picture. She's going to Europe, Molly, the protagonist, the female protagonist, for the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour was when middle to upper class youth in America, after their high school cycle, sometimes after college, went for several months, sometimes a year, to travel the world, not just Europe, often the Mediterranean, including the Holy Land as well. The idea being that they were growing, they're maturing, that they were getting the chance, the opportunities to interact with different social groups and getting ready to complete their education from the social standpoint so that the men, when they came back to the US, would be ready to enter the work market, the job market. And the women would be ready from that higher echelon of society, would be ready to get married. She goes to Europe, starting from England, clearly, right? Geographically, you can understand that. She probably took a ship to go to England. In England, she travels, she sees the countryside, the regions outside of London. In a place, she finds a lot of cars. And the moment she sees cars, now imagine this character, which is described as a young, strong, already independent American woman, because characters from the upper and middle classes are afforded this kind of independence, not women in general, not at all. This is the American aristocracy. This woman is carrying a Kodak camera, this big, and I have a link to the exact camera she's carrying. It's like a cube this big, where you turn a key and you take pictures. So she's already on the way of becoming technological, and she sees these cars, and right away her reaction is, my world is now small. I feel incomplete without a car. I need to have one, because without one, I'm not who I might be. My life would not be the same. Well, my life would be different if I had a car to use. My trip would be different, my experiences would be different, which is the foundation of pretty much every marketing campaign, especially for cars, but oftentimes for smartphones as well, especially in the past. So she now knows that some people have a car, and having a car makes them special individuals, makes them individuals that people look at. And you have this new idea, this new model for the sense of community. What is a community in the past? It's a community, take the Renaissance, the early modern era. A community is a place where people compete for attention, right? And if you're smart enough, successful enough, if you have leadership skills, people will give you attention, but you have to work for it. Consumerism changes the dynamic profoundly. Now, all I need to get attention is some bling bling, right? I have, I don't know, a Samsung Fold that costs $2,000. I have a Gucci bag. I have expensive shoes. I have a Lamborghini. People look at me, right? From this point on, we're in 1902, for the next 120 years, the interaction between the individual and the community changes from the point of view of consumption of goods. So I can go directly to the place where I'm at the center of attention, and people look at me and are envious of me and are jealous of me simply by sporting something that is unique, that is expensive, that is rare, difficult to find, or in this case, even difficult to operate. Because in terms of marketing, think of ways to sell the car. You have to sell something that you get and don't know how to use, which is pretty much the story of anyone from the 1980s. I bought my first personal computer in 1986. Fine, you turn it on, and you have C, capital C, angular parentheses, and a flashing cursor. Okay, that was DOS, before Windows. And of course, Apples were much more user-friendly even then. But DOS, what do I do with it, right? I have to practice and train in order to use the technology, yet the technology is selling. It's a hard sell, but it is selling because it makes you unique. It makes you different. It makes you able to be seen, right? Be recognized and entertain interesting conversations with the others. Okay, so she needs to have that card because she wants to get that kind of attention. She gets an old clunker, a car that by 1902 is already obsolete, very slow, and easy to break down, that is not very reliable. She needs a driver because she's learning how to drive, but she knows she'll take time to complete her training. She gets an obnoxious French driver. Of course, by definition, French character in an American novel has to be bad from the human side. And they go to France. I forgot to mention, Molly is chaperoned by Aunt Mary, so she has an adult to look after her and to prevent her from engaging in behaviors that wouldn't be ladylike, that wouldn't be appropriate for a woman who's not married. However, interestingly, this character of the aunt accompanying Molly is not really well developed because Molly is too independent. So Mary is there to guarantee that everything Molly does is decent enough, but certainly Molly is pushing the boundaries, constantly pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable. By the end of the novel, she even goes out to dinner with a man by herself. The man is not married, and of course she likes him, and he likes her, and they go out to dinner. To make it even more scandalous, she believes at that point that the man comes from a lower social class. She's a millionaire, the daughter of a millionaire, and he's supposed to be just a paid hired driver, a paid chauffeur. So they shouldn't interact socially. They shouldn't be sitting at the same table, or God forbid, touching each other. And by touching, I mean just patting each other's arm, not touching in a physical, sexual kind of way at all. So Molly and her aunt go to France because their plan is to go through France. They go to Paris, then they go back to the Atlantic Ocean, they go south towards the Pyrenees, they go to the Côte d'Azur, of course, the French Riviera, then they'll go to Italy, they go to Rome, they go to Sicily. Sicily is where the novel ends, and the journey is concluded with the promise of a marriage, of course. But what happens when they go to France? First, they experience the obnoxiousness of the French driver who's not able really to fix the car whenever it breaks. And so sometimes they have to spend time in a place waiting for the car to be fixed by a shop in a garage. Finally, the driver just takes the money and runs. He gets money to buy spare parts for the car, but he vanishes, he disappears. Before he disappears, in one occasion when Molly is stranded with her car on the side of the road, she's rescued by this British aristocrat who's John or Jack Winston, a proper British aristocrat with a traditional aristocratic title and the knowledge of the formalities that come with that. And of course, Jack himself is accompanied by his own driver. Later on, when they meet again and Molly is completely stranded without a driver, cannot continue on this journey, Jack promises to help her as a driver. That is to say, he pretends to be his own chauffeur and tells her, lets her understand that his chauffeur is the real Jack Winston, the aristocrat. So he says, my master is loaning me to you generously so you can continue on this trip. And so they do. And of course, this means that this prince, right, even though she doesn't know that he's a prince, it's like a Cinderella story, matching the story of Cinderella and then reversing in some interesting ways. He drives her and they spend a lot of time together in a confined space, right? It's a car, so she leans forward to talk to him, to tell him directions, and they experience a kind of physical proximity that would never have happened for someone, a coachman, handling a carriage with horses. Not at all. Not to mention the context, right? Because going on a carriage was normal for the aristocrats, was normal for the wealthy people to be taken out on a ride, but it came with a customary set of rules and no expectations. So very limited interactions with the crew of the carriage, even when you have valet, right? Because you might have two coachmen in front or a coachman and a valet, one or two valets in the back of the carriage, depending on the level of wealth of the family. But very limited interaction between the passengers and the crew, so to speak. In this case, the context is such that you have fear and anticipation of risks to be taken on the car itself. It's a new technology. It's like, think of your grandfather flying on a plane the first time, right? The excitement and the tension, right? Because you never know, how can you be up there, right? My mother-in-law would say, I don't know how you manage, because she would see from her village in Tuscany the planes fly from Milan to Rome. And she couldn't fathom that you could be hanging in the air and be safe enough there. So imagine the level of tension created by this new technology. And then the physical effect of the car on the body. Because you have a car that is vibrating a lot more than any car of today. That has many more noises from the engine, the chassis and the suspensions than any car of today. Much more that you smell, right? Because a lot of the gasoline ends up not being burned out properly. So you smell the gasoline, you smell the oil burned or otherwise. So it's very much a physical experience with a heavy psychological impact. And so now being in the car with a stranger becomes a shared adventure. It's not going out with a coachman you don't know, whose family you've never met, who's like Downton Abbey, right? The upstairs people, the wealthy, and the downstairs people, and they have some interaction. But in this case, look at the kind of situation they share, and there you find the foundation for a bond to develop between the female character and the male character, right? It's like the car is a facilitator, a catalyst for an interaction which is not just emotional or psychological, but in many ways physical, nervous. You share the same nervous tension produced by the car. So through this trip, they get closer and closer. And there is one interesting thing, which is that she admires Jack. Molly admires Jack. She knows he's just a driver, and therefore should not be considered marriage material. She knows that her father would never have it, her daughter, American aristocracy, marrying some schmuck from England, from a low-income family with no formal education, no knowledge of the proper manners of high society. However, what is the change that has changed in the mentality of Europe and the US at this point? Darwin came in with his theory of the champion of nature, the fittest specimen, as something that has value in a context, in an ecosystem. And when you see Molly and the way she observes Jack, who pretends to be James, this time as a driver, his name is James Brown, she sees a special individual, someone who is physically endowed, someone with leadership and courage, someone with skills, driving, working on the car, that are not just manual labor skills. They're higher level skills because it's like being able to fix your own computer or build your own computer in 1986, right? Imagine that. You belong to a different category. Nobody can say, you're like my carpenter because you use tools. Not at all, right? It's a different kind of operation. So, she thinks he's worth more than his own social standing, that it's a pity that he should be higher on the social scale. That's interesting. And that's something that justifies her, legitimizes her feelings for him. Meaning, Molly knows she cannot, shouldn't have feelings for Jack because he's so much lower on the social scale. But she feels entitled to test those feelings because he's down there, but clearly he has the quality of someone who's up here. And in fact, the result of Darwin's theories is not a social revolution, not at all. It's the introduction of the very conservative notion of natural aristocracy, meaning your place in society, in modern societies, is largely determined by your skills. So sooner or later, you'll end up in life in the place you deserve to be in, based on the skills nature gave you, whether or not those skills are in demand in the ecosystem where you are. Are you a programmer in California in 1995? Fine, you'll become a millionaire. Are you an Instagrammer in 2023? Good luck. Has been done, and now it's difficult to get to the top, right? So you have skills. Those skills might be valuable or not in the ecosystem where you operate. And then, of course, will you be able to develop those skills that nature gave you? Because you might be smart or physically endowed and never train or never read a book, never try anything complex, in which case you remain at the average, right? You may be more efficient at doing things because you're smarter, but you don't make anything of yourselves. So this idea of the natural aristocracy justifies the feelings that Molly feels for Jack, meaning that she knows that even though he's not an aristocrat or a member of the upper classes, he has all the qualities to get there. Okay? And you can understand what this means in the US at the beginning of the 20th century, as well as Europe, but especially in the US. Still an American writer writing this book. So their first car, the clunker, gets destroyed by a rival of Jack, a man, another obnoxious French-Belgian character who would like to become Molly's mate, partner, companion, and therefore he destroys the car to get rid of Jack, right? No car, no driver. His plan is, you'll continue the trip with me, mademoiselle. And Jack puts him in his place, shows who's the man between the two of them, gets rid of this competitor. Then Jack has to come up with a plan, and the plan is, he pretends that his own alleged master, the aristocrat, is loaning them his car, his fast British car, to continue on the trip. And so they do. They continue with this car, and they have many adventures, even accidents, so they get closer and closer. At some point, as I said, they even have dinner together without anyone in a posh place. So he goes to a place that shouldn't have had someone as low class as a paid driver at the table in a very classist society. He says that his formal attire is something he borrowed, but of course it is his own clothes. And they sit at this table. There is an accident where she touches his hand. Oh my God, so forbidden, so risque. And by the end, of course, they're clearly in love with each other, but they've also proven that she can be as good as a driver as he is, because by the end of the trip, she's completely proficient, competent with the car. She's this new woman that feminism was championing in the literature and the political campaigns of the period. Of course, as in every classical love story, boys meets girl, boys gets girl, you have to have a third act, boy loses girl, right? So that at the end you have the conclusion with the reunion. And of course, he loses her for a moment because she finds out he is Jack Winston. He is a true aristocrat. He is a true prince in a way, a Cinderella prince. But he lied to her the whole time, pretending to just be a chauffeur. So her reaction is, you're a liar, I cannot marry you. I love you, but you're not honorable because you lied, which is about 50% of every love story produced under $20 million, right? Or made for TV. By the end, of course, she forgives him, and their marriage is the reparation of everything a bit inappropriate that they've been doing together, right? Keep in mind that in this kind of love literature, even kissing a man without then the kiss leading to a marriage is considered inappropriate, okay? So this is the romance that you find in American and British literature during this time, with just a few exceptions. Of course, you also have, by this time, erotic novels, but they're a genre to itself. And so they'll get married. It's kind of a Cinderella story because he allegedly is Cinderella, right? This low-class character who ends up marrying American aristocracy. So she's the princess, but then he's also the prince, so it's not just Cinderella. The novel is written like a series of letters, so it's called an epistolary novel. It begins with Molly, chapter 1, writing to her father, telling her father how she got to England, and there she saw a car, and then she will write to him to say, I want this car, I'm going to buy this car. The independent woman that she is, and of course she's rich as well, she doesn't need permission from her father. The letters come from a variety of characters, but mostly from the two lead characters, Molly and Jack. Jack, who also is John, and as a driver goes by the name of James, so don't get confused, right? And the notes summarize what I've been telling you more or less. Keep in mind that what is edgy about the novel is this idea that it is prolonged proximity between an unmarried woman and a married man, which could be leading to promiscuity, right? It's a dangerous social situation. And it's not entirely new. Even when we read the short story by Charles Loomis, we found even in the illustration this idea, right? This is the electric taxi cab in the third of the short stories by Loomis, the one with Orville being forced, since he cannot jump, he has a broken foot or a hurting foot, jump out of this taxi cab, but you find Cupid, the angel of love, the angel of Venus, right? The promoter of a love relationship, right? Shooting the arrows to let love be born, be produced in a situation, right? So even here you have this idea that the car is the new Cupid, that the car has some supernatural power to make people fall in love. And I've listed here the foundation of the mortal romance genre because we'll see variations, and you find dozens of books during the span of 5 years, 8 years from this one, because of course everybody tried to imitate and replicate the success of the Lightning Conductor. Once they saw that Alice was selling more than 1 million books, everyone got into this kind of business. So you have circumstantial proximity as one of the foundations, meaning proximity between two characters who do not really have this strong desire to be together, right? They're not in love with each other. They're forced by the circumstances to spend time together, but of all places, the car, which is a different kind of context, especially when you consider the moving car, the car moving at speed, and the effect that speed has on your nervous system, on your physical body, even before we talk about emotions. So we're talking about pre-rational or irrational reactions, right? And this is something I already mentioned, this idea that you're on this moving car and there is a feeling of tension, the risk, right, connected to the technology, that it's like, I don't know if you've ever tried a new situation, let's say one of these super fast rides at an amusement park, and you are next to a stranger, but you hold the arm of a stranger. Has it ever happened to you? I remember the first time I was in a helicopter in Piedmont over the mountains, and of course you pay for the ride, so they have to include the thrill. So we had all plexiglass, right, in front of us. It's me, my friend Andrea. We had several Andrea in my group, and the helicopter driver. We go up to like 6,000 feet, 7,000. We're on the Alps. Okay, so we're watching the view, and then the helicopter goes like this, and we go down straight to the ground, and you have this glass in front of you, right? So you see the ground approaching, and Andrea, who was an engineer, took my arm, right? As a natural reaction to the thrill and the fear that he was feeling, right? So think of this kind of situation, how the thrill of a new experience can facilitate physical proximity and connection, connecting, bonding with another human being, regardless of what is appropriate. In this case, growing up for our generation, boys don't touch boys. Boys don't hold hands with boys, right? So you have to understand the context to grasp the magnitude of this gesture. My friend holding my arm, okay? And let me see if I need to add anything else to this. And the idea that the road is now a different place. And you can tell me, they had roads before, so how can it be a new experience being on the road? They were on the road on foot, on horse, on carriages, right? However, speed affords a different kind of experience on the road. Before, you could interact much more easily and in different ways with people. So take a road until the 1800s. On this road, you would find people on foot, people on horses, people on carriages, people working on the fields. And there are all possibilities of interaction granted by the fact that the people on foot are traveling 2 miles, 3 miles at most. People on horse are traveling between 6 and 10 miles per hour. People on carriages, again, are traveling between 6 and 12, maybe 15 miles for a short stretch, right? But a lot of interactions are possible. They see each other, for example. And there are rules for the road. Loomis himself has a wonderful short story about a man who's coming home to his wife and daughters, a middle class or upper middle class man, on his little cart, drawn by a carriage. And someone is hitchhiking, someone from his own social class, so he's forced to give the guy a ride. Those are the rules. And then, what are the consequences of this nice gesture that is forced by the rules of the road? That this guy will remain for dinner, will spend the night together, will walk out with one of his daughters, escorted by the parents, but will end up marrying, getting engaged to the daughter. So it's like a nice gesture is repaid by consequences that were unexpected and certainly unwanted. The protagonist in this short story hates the hitchhiker, finds him rough and intrusive. But one thing leads to another, and respect of proper form makes this happen. In the case of the automobile, well, it's much harder to interact with the people outside. Not only that, but think, for example, of celebrities of the time. The Emperor of Austria, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the King of France, by the time the automobile was there, France was not a monarchy, but the King of England or the Queen of Holland, etc. They would go out in public on a carriage, people would wave, people would look, make comments on their attire, right, their attitudes, etc. By the time cars are introduced, by 1906, people are complaining, yes, I saw the king come by, but I couldn't see anything because the car was going too fast. When a car is going, speed affords you anonymity, right? Even now, if someone drives by me at more than 20 miles per hour, I don't really have time to recognize them. I have to recognize the car. And then I can say, oh, that's Joe, that's Annie, etc. But otherwise, a little bit of speed, pressing on the accelerator, and you become anonymous. And you can also escape any kind of interaction. So the moving car, the road of the moving car becomes a different place. In many ways, a non-place. A place where you're not subject to the same social rules. And that is also the foundation of the road movie genre. People on the road do things that their regular lives would not have granted them as an opportunity. Try things. Because the other thing is that you have a car, you go far. So far that no one knows you. And if no one knows you, then you have no self-censorship, or less, and no public self-censorship. Meaning, you don't care what people in Greenport think of you because you don't know anyone there, right? If you travel 60 miles to another town, another village, or let me be European American tourists who are very proper in Manhattan, come to Rome, and they crash bottles of beer on the Spanish Steps, right? Or they get rowdy, or they scream. They would never do that in Port Jefferson Village, in Southampton, but they do that in Rome because nobody knows them, right? So who cares? Tomorrow is another day, I go home, and everybody will respect me. They don't know what I've done in Rome, or whether I acted inappropriately, and it does happen, okay? Maybe the opposite is also true. Maybe Italians behave terribly, horribly when they come to Manhattan in ways I don't recognize, okay? So the road becomes this place where rules can be suspended, censorship coming from the judgment of others is decreased in power because I don't know those people. Who cares about their judgment? For example, take a man and a woman. They go far away outside of their community. Who knows whether or not they're married? Transfer that into the societies of 1902, where a woman who's not married cannot be alone with a man who's not married without proper supervision, because otherwise she's losing her honor, right? Almost like Bridgerton would be a good example. If you've seen the series, the first and second year of Bridgerton, transfer that 100 years later, early 1900, pretty much the same for women in terms of censorship and judgment rendered on their behavior around men when they're alone, okay? And keep in mind, we're talking about mostly open-top cars, right? And to support the idea of anonymity, you also have the fashion for the automobile. So you wear goggles because you have to protect your eyes. It's not a paved road, so there is a lot of debris coming to your face. And therefore, you may have a cloth mask, but more importantly, you want to shield your eyes with heavy, big goggles. For women, you have all sorts of veils for the automobile, so that makes you hard to recognize. Okay. And with this idea of suspension of the rules, there is another narrative device that comes up and will be then transferred onto the screen of films. The idea that on the road, you can decide, I'm not going to be myself and do the same things, say the same things. I'm going to pretend I'm someone else. I'm going to pretend that I'm a different kind of character, given the opportunities. So, for example, later on in 1907, among the many motor romance novels, you find a Sicilian Incursion, where two wealthy New Yorkers come back from a trip out of town. They went to Westchester, I think. But coming back, one of them doesn't have the goggles on, so dust gets into his eye, so they stop at a pharmacy, because the pharmacist at that point would help you remove dust from your eye. Try now. Good luck. I cannot even get drugs from the pharmacy in less than an hour, let alone get help with my eye. While the friend who's not driving is inside this drugstore, this pharmacy, on, I don't know if it is Fifth Avenue, but somewhere in Manhattan, central Manhattan. The other, who's at the steering wheel with the goggles on, sees this nice woman come by. And she thinks this is a car for hire, right? Because not only did they have taxi cabs during this period, they also have regular cars like Uber that could be hired. Uber is just a digital version of something that existed in the past, especially when rules were not preventing people from working as part-time drivers. And through the story, he will continue to pretend he's a driver. He'll give her his own phone number, saying this is the number of garage where I keep my car. And of course, by the end of the story, they get engaged. Again, there is pretending, there is playing a different role from the Lightning Conductor to this example. Okay. I've talked about the Grand Tour, and notice that in this kind of novel, even the act of purchasing the vehicle becomes a key, a crucial part of the narrative, which is a first. Usually you would have, let's say, you take medieval literature where a simple esquire, a page, finds some magical weapon and then becomes eventually a knight, right? They find a weapon, but most of the story is about the use of the weapon, of this magical device they have found. In here, it's also the process of realizing that you want this product. It's not just, I see it, I want it, I buy it, it's mine, I use it. But it's, I see it, and now my perception of myself has changed. Now I cannot live with the idea of me without that product. Because I know that with that product I'll be much more, right? Like saying, my old computer is not as good as the one I've seen reviewed on YouTube. And if I get that one, everything will be much faster and I'll be more productive. And my ideas will get transferred onto the solid state drive much more quickly. And then you buy it and you realize that whether you have an iPad or I don't know, a Dell XPS 13 or anything else, or a computer that is 10-year-old, doesn't really make a difference. Don't tell anyone, but it doesn't make a difference. But you realize that your life cannot be the same now that you have this idea in mind. In my mind, I have myself as I am now and myself as I could be if I had that product. And I have to reconcile that. So it's interesting that this is that this happens. I'm trying to see if I can find. This is the camera she brought to England, and this is an incredible thing, right? For the time, it's about this big, an incredible camera. This made the success of a company such as Kodak, okay, which perished because they couldn't adapt then to the digital era. And the idea that the owner of the car goes by the label gorgeous man is simply to convey the idea. It's not that it's so gorgeous, it's the idea that the car makes him look so special. And the reasoning is that Molly herself will become special in the eyes of others once she gets it. So he's the gorgeous man, she'll be the gorgeous woman once she gets a car, right? That's the implication. And somewhere there is a passage where she says that she feels small once. There it is. TLC is the Lightning Conductor. There were several automobiles. This is Molly writing to her father. There were several automobiles in this village in the British countryside, starting off. And I can tell you, I felt small. Just as if I were Miss Noah getting out of the ark. You're out of sync. You're outdated. You're obsolete, right? How could I have a Nokia? My mother used the same Nokia for 20 years. And of course it worked perfectly for 20 years. But no one else, right? Younger, she was 91 or 92 when she died. No one younger could really live with the idea, I still have a Nokia, right? People will laugh at me. People will see me and consider me pathetic, okay? And this is the idea of bringing Miss Noah, meaning if I were the wife of Noah, this is how I feel now that people are traveling with cars and I'm still on a carriage, which is like the ark. This feeling small, I suggest you replace small to understand this with incomplete. I'm incomplete without this product. Or this product makes me more than I am now. In ways that relate to my public image, to my public persona, right? And of course you can understand that, right? Because you have sleuths of Instagrammers whose entire channel is based, look at me with this purse that costs $50,000, look at me with this car, with this watch, etc. So I'm much more than you are. I'm better than you do. Better than you are. Sorry. Okay. And of course from that point on, she has to continue her trip with the car, right? What a pity we couldn't do our tour on a motor car. Now this fancy Grand Tour of Europe that few people could afford in the United States is nothing, it's meaningless because they don't have a car and they're doing it on the train and carriages like everyone else. Now that they know what their trip could be, they had to get there, right? They had to complete that journey through the purchase of the product. And then once they have the car, then after getting the car, we might say like Monte Cristo, the Count of Monte Cristo from Dumas' novel, the world is mine, right? I'm the king of the world. Okay? Yeah? Think of, let's say, the people who paid $250,000 to die trying to get to the Titanic, right? So you don't know about these things, and you don't feel that you're missing on something, right? You know what happened after those poor people died over there? Guess what happened to the market? Because everyone else would say, oh, this is the end of that kind of market, right? The niche market. It's over. No one will want to go there. Actually, they're selling more tickets now because a lot of people did not know at all that you can get on a submersible and go down to the Titanic. And now more people are going to different companies, of course, because that thing was like MacGyver's submersible, paying even more than $250,000 to go there, right? Because now they know, and with that knowledge, their life is not complete if they don't have that experience, which is also the foundation of paid space travel. But this happens in a modern society based on consumerism. Okay. Look at this passage. By the time we were half through lunch, this is before she gets the car, I was envying him, the gorgeous man with the car, his car. I was envying him his car and feeling as if life wasn't worth living because I couldn't have it to play with, okay? Compared to people and iPhones 10 years ago, right? People camping outside a store for a week to get an iPhone in their hands, be the first to have a new model. And notice the references to what is proper for a woman like Molly in social situations, and think of how being on a car, especially with a stranger, a man, changes her sense of propriety, or how that lets her explore the boundaries of what is proper and venture beyond those boundaries without breaking them entirely, right? Because this is still a conventional novel. And as I said, has to end with marriage, so whatever a reader might have felt was inappropriate is forgiven because they get married. So everything is fixed by marriage. Okay. And again, you can find everything in here. Let me select. Right, so the continuation of the trip after that, after the car, I hope we shan't so much as see a railroad train. Vulgar people take the train. I'm special, I take the car. Except from a long distance. So I want to see the train in the landscape. I don't want anything to do with it. Automobiles forever, say I. Mine in particular. Because of course mine is special. It's always like that. My phone is special, yours is, well, what is that? So let me move to the next one. Let's see. So this is an interesting passage about how difficult it is to operate a car, which is supposed to give you a sense of the skills, the kind of skills required to become a driver, and therefore the steps made by a woman in becoming a fluent, proficient driver, and what that makes for the parity of the genders. Okay, and this is one of the passages about the physical effects of driving. The air was cold. It's an open-top car, right? So you feel a lot of air coming at you. But instead of making one shiver, and that's the first mention of something you cannot control, right? Shivering is a physical reaction that is hard to control. There is a threshold for temperature, and then you start shivering, right? If you're cold. So this is the first suggestion, the first implication that this fact that you're riding a car at speed does things to you that you cannot control, including possibly falling in love or feeling erotic tension. Our blood tingled with exhilaration as we flew along. 30 miles, maybe less. You know what a chilly body Aunt Mary is. Even she didn't complain of the weather, right? This effect of the car is so powerful that changes everyone's mind, and hardly needed her foot warmer. This is life, said I to myself. It seemed to me that I'd never known the height of physical pleasure, until I'd driven in a motor car. It was better than dancing on a perfect floor with a perfect partner to perfect music, better than eating when you're awfully hungry, better than holding out your hands to a fire when they're numb with cold, better than a bath after a hot, dusty railway journey. But these are all physical effects. So the idea is that the car cannot be understood rationally, because it's something is like the amusement thrill of today. You are in it and you lose control. And that's how being in a car was perceived and then represented, right? Keep in mind the example I probably mentioned at the beginning of the semester of the French doctor from this period, just a couple of years later, Dr. Blanchot, mentioning how he promises he can cure you from morphine addiction with car rides. So his patients replace the thrill of morphine or cocaine with with riding at speed. Okay. This is her mistaken thinking that Jack is the master, and that's what he is, but then having to believe what he says, right? But this man was much better looking than his companion, whom I knew now was the master. The opposite is true, but that's the idea of natural aristocracy. That is to say, it doesn't matter if you don't wear your badge, your title. People recognize that you're superior. That's the idea that comes out of Darwin, not the idea that we need to democratize society, but that in the end, if there are successful people in society, it's for a reason. There must be a natural reason, a natural cause behind that. Otherwise, they won't hold their success for too long, right? As I said, the theory of Darwin is reinterpreted like social gravity. You end up in the place where you deserve to be based on the skills you have and how valuable those skills are. One can see from the way he talks that he's an intelligent, competent young man. So she can fall in love with him because he has all the qualities, but the social standing. Okay, let me circulate the attendance while I wrap this up. Any questions, any comments, any reactions or suggestions before I continue and conclude? Okay, so make sure you read this novel with these notions in mind. And as I said, you can look at these passages with quick notes, with formatting, and the titles of the sections will tell you what the theme is, right? So the idea, for example, that operating a car makes you superior to the rest of humanity, makes you special. But going back to the idea of what is proper and how it changes with the car, just think of something simple that you find mentioned in ads about cars. You know, one way they sell electric cars were very popular around 1902. One way they sell electric cars to women is that you don't need to crank them up. And there is one ad in particular that mentions how for a woman, of course a woman with a car is a woman from the middle to upper class, it is inappropriate to bend down to crank the engine and start the car. That position is in itself not proper for a woman, right? A woman of that social stature should not bend in public, and with an electric car, you don't need that. You can be proper and have a car at the same time. So there are all kinds of ways that the context of a car forces rules to become harder to adapt and fit into the new context. Okay? So read these readings when you have a chance. Don't forget the assignment due Friday night, which is the assignment on Jules Verne and Fear and Fascination of Technologies. And I'll see you on Thursday for a brief continuation of this and more scenes from the film Christine. Make sure you sign the attendance before you leave, and talk to me if you need anything, okay?